Hey guys, Caroline here, and this week I want to ask you a simple question. Should you be overhead pressing? Now, the overhead press is one of the most butchered exercises I see down at the gym, and it's also one of the exercises that has the highest risk if you're not in a good position to perform the exercise. So, there are a few parts to this question. Step number one, do you have any history of shoulder pain or injuries? A rotator cuff tear, maybe your arm hurts when you lift it overhead, anything at all like that, I would say that the overhead press is contraindicated, which means that you just should stick to doing other kind of pressing, okay? So if you have any history of shoulder pain or injuries, you probably shouldn't be overhead pressing. Step number two, do you participate in some kind of sport, whether it's a strength competition or otherwise, that requires you to have overhead strength? So if you're a power lifter, for example, while pressing overhead can help your bench press, it's not actually part of your competition, so you don't technically have to perform it. Now, if you're involved in strongman and some other kind of strength sports, there are overhead pressing elements, quite a lot of them actually, in the sport, so then it's really important for you to train the press. But if you're just a normal person who is working out to feel good, to stay in shape, and you're not participating in any of those kinds of activities, you don't have to perform the overhead press. Step number three, do you have the core strength and stability to keep your spine in a safe position when you lift your arms up overhead? Let me show you one of the most common mistakes I see with overhead pressing. So someone gets in position with a bar, or even with dumbbells to be honest, and as they press, you see them arching, trying super hard to muscle up overhead. So this position here, with that huge arch in your back, is really unsafe for your spine. So if you notice or already know that you're doing this when you press, you probably shouldn't be overhead pressing. Spend your time working to build anti-extension strength by using planks, dead bugs, the ab wheel if you're a little more advanced, and then you can work your way back up to overhead pressing. Step number four, do you have the upper body mobility needed to get your arms safely overhead? So a lot of people are really restricted in the upper part of their back, and they don't know how to properly move their shoulder blades, which means that when they get into the top position, they put a lot of stress on the shoulder joint, which can lead to pain and injuries down the line. So here's one simple test you can use to see if you have the necessary upper body mobility. So standing a few inches away from the wall with your feet, getting your back as flat as you possibly can along the wall. So if you're like me and you live in a little bit of an arched back position, you probably need to tilt your hips just a little bit, head against the wall, and then keeping your arms straight. If you can lift your arms all the way back overhead and touch the wall without bending your elbow, without a huge arch in your back, then you probably have the necessary tools to get overhead safely. If not, if it feels really restricted, if you have to bend your elbows, you probably are not suited to get into that completely overhead position. So what now? What if you've determined that you're probably not suited to overhead press? What can you do instead to train pressing, to train your shoulders, etc.? So my number one recommendation is to do some landmine pressing. I'll show you a clip at the end of this video, but essentially a landmine is going to allow you to get overhead and some of the same benefits, get a good reach with the shoulder, but you're not directly overhead, okay? So it's a little bit more shoulder-friendly position. You can do your pressing in the half kneeling position. So half kneeling looks like the bottom of a lunge here. If I'm doing a dumbbell press or a kettlebell press, it's gonna be a lot harder for me to arch my back if I don't have the core stability to press in a standing position. And then last thing is you can focus more on horizontal pressing and pulling especially. Things like push-ups, maybe the bench press if you can tolerate it, and lots of rows. Those will ultimately potentially help you work into a position where maybe you can do a little bit more overhead pressing. Landmine pressing is a great alternative for strict overhead pressing. As you see, you don't even need a landmine setup. You can just place the bar in the corner of the room. Focus on resisting shrugging and reaching with your shoulder blade.